Hello, I am delighted to be able to speak to you. Many thanks for the invitation. My name is Jon Paul Rodríguez and I wear 3 hats. I spend most of my time chairing the IUCN Species Survival Commission. I am also a professor in ecology at the Venezuelan Institute for Scientific Investigation. And third, while I was an undergraduate student in biology here in Caracas, in 1987, 5 fellow students and I founded Provita, a non-governmental organization that I am currently president of. So I move between academia, national and international conservation organizations. I call myself an irrational optimist, have always been. There is no question that conservation works. We have plenty of evidence that nature can recover, that carefully crafted interventions can reverse species declines. We have seen it in the sea, on land, and in rivers and lakes. Much more money is spent on destroying nature than on saving it. Anything that we can do to tip the balance in favor of nature will have a positive impact. And that's what I am always aiming for. Now, 2 major challenges have shaped my professional life. The first one I call the biodiversity paradox. The second is the disconnect between global priorities and local action. Now imagine a color-coded map of the world so that countries with, for example, more bird species are shown in warm colors, such as red and orange, while countries with fewer species are in cold colors, such as green and blue. You would see tropical areas in red and orange changing progressively to green and blue as we move to higher latitudes. Now, imagine the same map, but with the different colors reflecting a measure of financial resources, such as per capita gross domestic product, or GDP, or a measure of institutional capacity, such as number of IUCN member organizations, or a measure of scientific capacity, such as number of authors that participated in the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. These 3 maps will be the opposite image of the bird map. Most birds and the rest of biodiversity are found where financial resources, institutions, and scientific capacity is lowest. This is the biodiversity paradox, and a challenge that we need to address to be able to reverse biodiversity decline. So that's the first challenge. Now to the second. IUCN is a global federation of conservation organizations. Members include states, government agencies, NGOs, indigenous peoples organizations, and private companies. In addition to members, IUCN also has 6 professional commissions. SSC is one of these, with over 10,000 volunteer experts in 174 countries, who work on science and conservation of fungi, plants, and animals. They are the primary source of information and analysis for the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. There is no comparable evidence-based scientific network on biodiversity knowledge anywhere in the world. Now, one more bit of information before we move to what we're doing to address these challenges. All the work of SSC is framed by what we call the species conservation cycle, which has 3 consecutive steps: assess, plan, and act. We typically begin by compiling all we know about a species and produce a red list assessment. Then, we use these data to develop action plans that identify priorities and guide future investment. The cycle closes when these priorities are implemented and turned into conservation action. SSC leaders are global authorities on the assessment of species extinction risk. They regularly contribute to the Red List and are happy to continue to do so. But what they really want to be remembered for is for saving species. The challenge, this is the second challenge, is that although the science underpinning the Red List is global, the actions preventing extinction are local. In other words, the Red List tells us what the status of species is at the global level, but conservation action happens nationally or often subnationally. So local, evidence-based conservation action should be driven by local knowledge and local networks. To address both challenges, we have developed and are about to launch Reverse the Red, a global movement that ignites strategic cooperation and action to ensure the survival of wild species and ecosystems, with focus at the national level. Reverse Red pursues reversing declining trends revealed by red lists of species and ecosystems. It mobilizes and unites the network of SSC experts with IUCN's 1,400 member organizations, which include 91 states, the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, 400 zoos and aquariums, plus botanic gardens, and the multitude of experience and skills of the Smithsonian Institution's Earth Optimism, HHMI Tangle Bank Studios, On the Edge Conservation, San Diego Zoo Global, and 18 additional founding partners. Reverse Red implements SSC species conservation cycle at the national level, where assessment of risk informs conservation plans that catalyze collaborative action for species and ecosystems. The primary implementation unit are national Reverse Red hubs. These are decentralized, flexible, and adaptive, led in each country by a coordination group that brings together governments, experts, and practitioners, supported largely through partnerships with NGOs, zoos, aquaria, botanical gardens, and museums, and convened by a neutral body such as SSC. The model can be replicated at any scale, though initially we aim to focus on countries that need it most because of the biodiversity paradox. Our first hubs are already in place in Albuquerque Biopark and Indianapolis Zoos in the US, Oceanário de Lisboa in Portugal, Parque das Aves in Brazil, Provita in Venezuela, Fundación Temayquén in Argentina, Sambi and BirdLife in South Africa, and they're in development at Wildlife Reserves Singapore and Zoo and Aquarium Association in Australia. As these partners join the movement and local capacity for implementing conservation action increases, we aspire to help halt and reverse the decline of nature. At the core structure of SSC, we're also working to address the biodiversity paradox. We're actively seeking leaders that help us diversify in terms of gender and age balance, geographical origin, and institutional diversity. We envision a new generation of leaders that better represents threatened species and ecosystems, and a range of expertise that includes academics, practitioners, communicators, and decision makers to deliver effective conservation on the ground. There are many examples from which Reverse Red is learning to achieve effective collaboration for species recovery. And now, I'll tell you a little about just 5 of them. Of all sea turtles, Kemp's Ridley is the smallest in size, population, and range, and the most critically endangered. All Kemp's Ridleys nested at a single primary beach near Rancho Nuevo in Mexico. By the time this remote location was discovered by a scientific community in 1963, the population was already in steep decline, and by the mid-1980s, only a few hundred females were left. A coalition of stakeholders from government, academia, and civil society launched one of the most comprehensive and successful international conservation efforts on record, an expensive and risky binational experiment to establish nesting beaches in Texas, combined with a massive program to implement the use of turtle excluder devices on shrimp boats in the Gulf of Mexico. By the early 2000s, Kemp's Ridley was on an exponential recovery trajectory that, with a few dips, has now continued for decades. The Guam kingfisher, Sihek in local Chamorro language, was extinct in the wild in 1986 due to predation by introduced brown tree snakes. A mere 29 individuals were rescued and held in human care in zoological institutions in the United States and Guam. At present, there are 140 Sihek, and their release into the wild is planned for 2022. The Wayman and the Tenquile are 2 tree kangaroos that may have become extinct from the native Papua New Guinea were it not for the community-based conservation program of the Tenquile Conservation Alliance. During the last decade, populations of these tree kangaroos have benefited from a hunting moratorium, while supporting the well-being of people through improvements including water tanks, reliable food, fair land access fees, participation and training in tropical forest management. Scientists have also contributed to camera trap monitoring providing the data that document the achievement of nature conservation goals. By focusing both on the needs of people and wildlife, although Waimang and Tanquile continue to be listed as critically endangered, the forest and their populations, as well as the benefits they provide, are stable. Jatamansi, or spikenard, is one of Nepal's most commercially valuable and heavily exploited plants, used around the world in aromatherapy, cosmetics, and food products. The harvest of Jatamansi in 9 Nepalese districts provides at least 15,000 people with an average 25% of their annual income. Populations are declining due to habitat loss and overharvesting, threatening the survival of the species, the ecosystem's wider biodiversity, and the livelihood of harvester communities. Conservation measures have focused on building capacity in Nepal by training nearly 1,000 Jatamansi harvesters, 40% of them women, and working also with consumers to ensure sustainability of trade. This has shifted trade from being the primary threat to the species to its main incentive for conservation. Forest restoration has been widely embraced by governments as a powerful tool to mitigate climate change. But it must also play a role in recovering threatened native species and the ecosystems that they inhabit. The Parana pine is a towering tree growing 40 meters in height, found in southern Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. The extent of Araucaria forest, that's the scientific name of the Parana pine, is believed to have declined by more than 97% in the last century. There are major plans across Brazil with the government committed to restoring 12 million hectares of forest by 2030 in response to the Bond Challenge. Local nurseries are planting organizations support Parana pine restoration, as well as increasing the number of other threatened tree species. Research has been undertaken since 2011, locating mother trees in the wild as a source of seeds. Threatened trees are now grown in a dozen nurseries, and training is provided to farmers, NGOs, businesses, and universities. All these efforts have taught me that we must never give up. Even in the most improbable of situations, conservation works. We just need to do more of it. We are interested in hearing from you and listening to your ideas and suggestions. We can all help reverse the red. Please join us.